Ukrainian armed forces have taken their revenge. Pokrovsk pinned Putin's army to the ground. Our forces are methodically crushing the enemy. There was a real rout on the front line. After this, Russian generals have stopped keeping track of their losses. A direct hit. Kupiansk held out. There were battles there that changed everything completely. And now a new front is unfolding. Near Zaporizhzhia, it's a real bloodbath. Ukrainian defenders gave the enemy a taste of their own medicine. Footage that gives you chills. What's happening on the front line right now will show you at this very moment.
Pokrovsk is currently the main hotspot of the Russian-Ukrainian war. The main objective of the enemy is to gain as strong a foothold in the city as possible, according to the Ukrainian armed forces. To achieve this, the enemy is increasingly using civilian clothing. This is how, in particular, they managed to raise the Russian tricolor over the Pokrovsk city council. A few hours later, the defense forces restored the Ukrainian flag to its place, destroying an observation post inside the building and clearing out the enemy in the process. At the same time, fighting continues in other districts of the city as well.
Special units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces have eliminated more than 100 Russian occupiers. This figure only accounts for irrecoverable losses, not including so-called sanitary losses. Currently, the main efforts of the special units, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and the defense forces are focused on unblocking logistics for the defense forces, expanding the area of presence with the aim of preventing, if possible, the operational encirclement of our units.
At the same time, during the attacks on Pokrovsk, the Russians tried to use the weather as a factor, according to soldiers on the ground, and the first attempts to drive through the city with vehicles have already been recorded.
Meanwhile, a National Guard drone operator from the Hostre Kartus unit is observing an unpleasant trend. The Russians, at the very least, are trying to enter Pokrovsk using vehicles. Unfortunately, the weather is now playing into the occupiers' hands, writes Hostre Kartus. If before we saw Russian troops infiltrating Pokrovsk only on foot, at most there were occasional attempts to break through on motorcycles. Today, because of the fog, we have already encountered the first Russian military pickup truck in the city. They leisurely scattered barricades and drove through the streets of Pokrovsk.
However, they were later destroyed, analysts add. At the same time, the main clashes are already taking place on the far outskirts of Pokrovsk. Both Ukrainian and Russian positions remain within the city itself. Both sides are making a particular effort not to draw attention to themselves so as not to attract a barrage of drones.
The main fighting between Ukrainian and Russian units is taking place on the northern outskirts. The Ukrainian forces that remain deeper in the city are not drawing attention for now. Most likely, they are waiting for reinforcements to increase their counterattacks. It turns out that the ongoing Russian infiltration has deprived Ukraine of control over most of Pokrovsk, creating a gray zone. But Russian soldiers also can't take control of it, they lack the manpower, and the threat from drones is significant.
However, this situational success of the occupiers is primarily due to colossal losses. As our drone operators report, assault groups usually consist of 3 people, with the clear expectation that 2 will almost certainly be killed, and if anyone survives, it will be only 1.
For the Russians in the towns near Pokrovsk and in Pokrovsk, losses reach a ratio of 1 to 18 in favor of the Ukrainians. That is, for every wounded or killed Ukrainian soldier, there are up to 18 killed and wounded Russian troops.
Russian units are also aware of these statistics, so every time reinforcements are brought in for the occupiers, it looks something like this. People against the dawn. The hostages are filling in, they're straightening the towels, clicking their tongues. During the roll call, it fills up, I don't want to. Meanwhile, analysts are noting successes by the territorial defense forces in the north, where Russia continues its attempts to outflank our group from the rear. However, each time they
fail, our fighters have managed to significantly improve their positions in these directions. In addition, there has been significant progress in the Shakov area. This effectively allows us to cut off the so-called incursion of Russian troops into the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses.
Putin's troops are also failing to achieve their objectives in Kupiansk. The city, which according to Gerasimov has supposedly been surrounded for 2 weeks, is putting up such resistance that the Russians haven't advanced a single meter there during this time.
Of course, there is no talk of Kupiansk being surrounded, just like Pokrovsk, because the Russians' plan was to break through from the north across the river and from the south, to cut off a large group of Ukrainian troops, eliminate them, and create a breach in our defenses.
They wanted to do this, but they failed. That's why the assault continues, with attempts to infiltrate from the north into the city in this way. But the defense forces of Ukraine are acting actively both in Kupiansk itself and to its north.
Meanwhile, an unexpected direction of fighting is unfolding in the Zaporizhzhia sector, right on the bed of the Kakhovka reservoir.
Yes, it has dried up enough for soldiers to be able to pass through there. As a result, Ukrainian special forces made their way to the Bilshi Kushuhuri Islands, where Russian opposition forces were already present. The Ukrainians achieved victory, took the islands, and now only a part of the mainland, raised their flag. By the way, this is what Bilshi Kushuhuri used to look like. For a long time after the dam was breached, the bottom of the Kakhovka reservoir remained muddy and soft, but it gradually dried out and became overgrown with grass and shrubs. As we can see, infantry can already move around there. Light vehicles probably can as well.
And finally, to wrap things up, new details have emerged regarding the recent Ukrainian armed forces strike on Donetsk. As is known, a warehouse storing Shahed-type drones was hit there the day before. Now it has become clear how many of them were there.
It is estimated that the number of Shahed-type UAVs, including Iran, stored at the warehouses in Donetsk airport was around 1,150 to 1,200. Were all of them destroyed? That is unknown. According to analysts' estimates, that's about a month's supply of Shaheds for use at the front line, meaning for striking tactical targets on the front, for which Shaheds are essentially converted into giant FPV drones.
Let me remind you, most experts agree that the strike was carried out. Ukrainian Flamingo missiles, which in fact successfully broke through Russian air defenses 3 times in 4 days. There is alarm in the very heart of the Kremlin. The Russian capital is gripped by panic. A real drama is unfolding in the corridors of power. Gerasimov is on the verge of collapse. Putin, in a fit of rage, is tearing into his subordinates. Everyone is afraid of being made the scapegoat as the dictator looks for a new culprit to cover up his own failures. What once seemed like an unshakable state of power is now falling apart before our very eyes. The army is demoralized, generals are turning away, and the system is cracking in every direction. The Kremlin, which sowed fear for decades, has now fallen into its own trap. Whether Moscow can hold on, more on that in just a moment. The last leg of Valery Gerasimov's chair has finally broken. The movement Atezh, citing information from officers of one of the Russian military groups, reports that the Kremlin is extremely dissatisfied with the general's work, and, to put it mildly, his untruthful reports from the front.
Putin gave Gerasimov a deadline to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November. This order is the general's last chance to keep his position. Against the backdrop of this ultimatum, there has been a sharp increase in meat grinder tactics on the Pokrovsk front. The command is sending large waves of personnel into suicidal attacks in order to fulfill the order at any cost.
Unremarkable and lacking charisma, Valery Gerasimov is the man to whom Putin owes his first presidential term. It was he who, while Moscow was preparing to check boxes on ballots, commanded the fighting for the village of Komsomolskoye. This battle, which lasted 15 days, became the key and final one in the Russian Second Chechen campaign. Gerasimov delivered victory to candidate Putin, stepping over the countless corpses of Russian soldiers and local residents.
They let us leave the village, but they didn't let us get far. They were unexpectedly forced to stay for several days on, due to the situation. The outskirts of the village, but in reality they served as a human shield.
In 2012, it was Gerasimov who presented the hybrid warfare formula to the Ukrainian leadership. At that time, he insisted that it was necessary to move away from classical wars towards local destabilization.
The approach is reinforced by the active use of the protest potential of the fifth column.
A little later, the Gerasimov formula was first tested by the Russians in Crimea and then in Donbass. According to Bellingcat investigators, in 2014, Valery Gerasimov was the initiator of sending regular Russian troops to Ukrainian Ilovaisk and transferring Russian military equipment to the separatists, from which, among other things, the Malaysian Boeing was shot down. Mute Gerasim, as this grey cardinal of the general staff is called among themselves, has outlasted all his flamboyant and loud-voiced critics.
Those who do not provide us with the ammunition that we desperately need, or will eat them in hell piece by piece. We currently have a severe 70% shortage of ammunition supplies. Shoigu, Gerasimov, can you tell us where exactly is the ammunition?
Prigozhin was blown up. Strelkov-Gherkin is rotting behind bars. After the scandal, it was thanks to Valery Gerasimov's efforts that the favorite was sent there as well. The favorite general of Russian Z Patriots, General Popov. Even Shoigu was carried out of the Ministry of Defense, but mute Gerasim is still sitting in his chair. Although rumors about his dismissal have been actively circulating since last summer, and now supposedly they really have some basis. If Gerasimov fails to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November, he will be replaced by a certain Viktor Viktorovich Poznikir, who was born and raised near the Ukrainian city of Sumy. Not much is known about him. He was secretly awarded the Order of Zhukov, and in February,
in the year 2024, he was officially promoted to the rank of Colonel General, marking a significant advancement in his military career. The cities of Palmyra and Aleppo, both of which have played important roles in recent military developments, were notable during this time. Poznikir also addressed the ongoing efforts and responsibilities of the Russian military police operating in the Middle East, highlighting their crucial role in maintaining order and supporting stability in the region. Additionally, he openly criticized the continued presence of American military forces, expressing concerns about their impact on the overall situation and the prospects for peace in the area. A bigger stir was caused by the Lieutenant General's statement about U.S. plans to develop a global missile defense system. At the Moscow Conference on International Security, Poznikir called Washington a likely adversary of Moscow. To overcome missile defense, Viktor Viktorovich proposed using the Sarmat and Avangard systems.
it is still unknown whether Gerasimov will be able to outsmart his adversaries again and hold on. Since the summer, the occupiers have been amassing troops in the Pokrovsk direction and probing for weak spots in the Ukrainian defense. On their side are Russia's vast resources, which they spare no expense to achieve their goals, and a large number of fortune seekers who have been lured by contracts and the new status of hero. And in 2025, Pokrovsk could become an important and decisive battle, just like the Chechen village of Komsomolskoye once was.
Exclusive, Donbass is buzzing after a powerful strike by Ukrainian forces. The Flamingos hit their target precisely. The occupiers' underground arsenal turned into a raging inferno. Madjar and his team pulled off the explosion of the century. Russian generals are in a panic. The Kremlin is boiling. After such a fiasco, heads will roll at the top. And that's not all. A new barrage of strikes over Crimea. Drones have precisely destroyed enemy positions. Warehouses are burning. Equipment is on fire. The peninsula is shaking from the explosions. Are these the first notes of the great liberation of Crimea and Donbass? All the shocking details are in the following report.
A unique operation that lasted for months ended with a spectacular explosion in Donetsk. According to locals, nothing like this has ever been seen before in the occupied territories. Where did it hit, what was destroyed, and most importantly, what did the Ukrainian armed forces use to strike?
Judging by the special effects and the massive explosions, it was the Flamingo missiles at work. And
now let's go through everything step by step. The night before, a powerful explosion rocked Donetsk. After that, according to eyewitness videos, a fireball appeared in the sky resembling a nuclear mushroom cloud. Windows were blown out in buildings several kilometers from the epicenter. Right now,
my windows have been shattered.
In reality, this is the area of the Oktyabrski airport. A large ammunition depot, missiles hit there. There is no official information yet, but people are already talking about an ammunition depot. I saw the video. It's spectacular. Most likely, it really is a very large missile or shell depot, because in the video, just like in science fiction movies or computer games, there's an explosion, then a second explosion, and you can actually see this glowing, rapidly expanding shockwave. So it was a very successful strike on the Donetsk depots.
a bit later, this issue was clarified by the head of the UAV systems of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Robert Madjar Brody. According to his information, the strike hit a large depot of Shahed-type drones where warheads were also stored.
The development of this complex target turned into a months-long painstaking intelligence operation, pieced together from tiny fragments. Last night, it was carried out using appropriate strike assets by the Special Operations Forces and the Missile and Artillery Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Analysts note that despite the range of the Shahed drones, it was very important for the Russians to keep the storage of these drones close to the front line. After all, when the occupiers launch UAVs just a few dozen kilometers from the line of contact, the Ukrainian armed forces simply do not have enough time to respond quickly. As a result, the drones carry out their terror in frontline cities and also strike at the forward positions of our troops.
Disrupting the logistics of supplying shells and rockets for drones in the Pokrovsk direction and in Pokrovsk itself is very important for us right now.
But as for what struck the defense villages, our command preferred to keep silent. One thing is certain, drones definitely took part in the attack. But something else came in right after them.
As the footage from there shows, it was clearly not just drones at work. UAVs, as can be understood, visited the local air defense, but the final blow was delivered by something resembling a rocket. Perhaps it was a drone or maybe even a missile.
The fact that such missiles were used is also supported by Magyar's report about the participation of Ukraine's missile forces in the attack.
I don't think the warehouse with Shaheds was unprotected, that it was just hangars. Most likely. It was probably some kind of underground bunker. And that's another reason why I think these were flamingos. Of course, they could have used Storm Shadow as well. Storm Shadow would have worked here too. They have an anti-bunker capability. Nevertheless, the scale of the detonation shows that, well, in any case, it seems to me, if you look at the first second, the explosion there was clearly bigger than just a few hundred kilograms of a Storm Shadow warhead.
So yes, most likely it was our Ukrainian flamingos who for the third time just this week have inflicted massive damage on the Russians. But in Crimea, such power wasn't needed, so drones were sent to attack the peninsula. In occupied Simferopol, around 2:30 in the morning, a fire broke out at an oil depot. It is likely referring to Krimnaftosbad in the area of the village of Bityumna. There were also reports of 4 strikes in Vardiska, after which smoke rose into the sky. There the strikes likely hit the local thermal power plant, which temporarily ceased operations.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.